Thom Hartmann here with you. So I was reading this piece by Bob Brigham over at Raw Story, and it was about a study that was done by Roy Perilous, who teaches medicine at the Harvard Medical School. And of this, he said, it's pretty striking. He said, in our most recent survey, we asked our 20,000 U.S. respondents about 4 items of misinformation related to vaccine. 1 in 5 believes at least one of them. And about half the people we asked weren't sure of at least one of them. So then he goes on to say, if you believe at least one of these 5 items, you're about half as likely to be vaccinated. And then it gets really interesting. He says, among those people, we see high rates of depression among people who believe disinformation. We've seen rage. Basically, he's talking about believing these lies that you find on Facebook and other social media are making people mentally ill or challenging them. So I wanted to get, our resident expert on all things mental on the program, and I mean that in the most positive way possible. Dr. Justin Frank, the psychoanalyst, clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University, author of Trump on the Couch, Obama on the Couch, Bush on the Couch, no doubt an upcoming Biden on the Couch, sir. Justin Frank, MD on Twitter. Welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. It's good to be back. This is quite an interesting study that's been published, basically. And the interview was conducted on MSNBC with Alicia Menendez on Saturday, I think. Mm-hmm. And basically, there's an increase in depression among people who are believers of misinformation, especially anti-vaxxers. And one of the things that he said also that's important, though, is that there's already an increased depression since COVID. I've had more patients who are depressed. There's more issues to deal with since COVID. People feel alone, isolated, unhappy, anxious, and frightened. So I think that one of the things that's important to remember is that all of us have what's called an average expectable environment inside. We have it from childhood, from being served food properly, going to school, parents, all of those things. It's an average expectable environment. But right now, the environment is not average, nor is it expectable. So there's much more anxiety in general among people. So I thought that the interview was very interesting with a psychiatrist at Harvard, at Mass General, because what I come away with is that basically that misinformation is malignant. It is dangerous to the mental health.
It's like a psychological poison.
It's like a psychological poison, exactly. And to make it even more complicated, it's a psychological poison even to those who don't follow the misinformation, because we become, those of us who really follow, shall we say, Dr. Fauci and the CDC and support mask mandates, it also makes us a little bit uneasy to have other people questioning the very authorities and the very people that we follow, and eventually it can cause us to doubt our own self and our own facts. And I think that this misinformation is really poison. It poisons the system for the entire country. So even if you don't watch Fox, you could be poisoned by Fox. If you don't watch any of those things from Hannity to Tucker Carlson, you can be poisoned by them. Because what's happening is that it's very important to remember. We used to say this when we were dealing with psychotic patients at Harvard. There's a whole kernel of wheat in every Wheaties flake. In other words, there's a whole kernel of truth, even if the people who are very misinformed are misinformed about facts, there's some reason they get enraged. There's some reason they are afraid to take the vaccine. And part of it is misinformation, but part of it is, what about just the basic reason that they love their children too, and they're afraid for their children's safety? So once you get with fear, you have a lot of susceptibility to fear, paranoid anxiety, and misinformation, and you end up trying to protect someone you love. So when I don't know if you saw the program or did you just read the Raw Story article, in the program they showed people really crying, women, when they were talking about their children at a PTA meeting in Michigan, I think it was. Mm-hmm. It was very moving. People were quite sad and scared and concerned, and they didn't know who to believe. And so what happens when you get this kind of misinformation, most people retreat to binary thinking. We retreat to thinking about either or. Either you're an anti-vaxxer or you're, shall we say, sane, like you and I are. And we end up having an either-or way of thinking about things, and that can interfere with all kinds of communication. The thing that you don't know about if you didn't see the program was there were two doctors on that program. One was Dr. Perlis, the psychiatrist, and the other doctor was a woman anesthesiologist. And it was very interesting because he was talking about how to listen, how to communicate, how to understand. And the woman who was the anesthesiologist said, I don't have any patience for these people anymore. I'm sick of trying to listen to them. We have to get vaccinated now and wear masks now. We have an urgent crisis now. And I was thinking to myself, oh, my goodness, that's a psychiatrist and an anesthesiologist. Anesthesiologists put people to sleep so they don't bother the surgeon. And, it was a very interesting discussion.
Dr. Frank, we're talking with Dr. Justin Frank, the psychoanalyst and clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University, himself a psychiatrist. Back prior to the Reagan Revolution, and then in the late 1970s, the Pew organization has been doing studies going back to the 50s of, do you trust government to do the right thing? Do you trust your elected officials to do the right thing? Variations on that question. And what they found was that pre-1980, more than 70, I'm doing this from memory, so I don't have the exact numbers, but it was well over 70%, 74, 77%, something like that. Somewhere in the 70% of Americans said, yes, I trust the government. Now, we were putting men on the moon. Certainly there was still, debate and disagreement. I mean, this was the Vietnam War had just ended, right? So there was still a lot of doubt, but still, the majority of people, yes, I trust the government. Pew did the similar study last year, and the number was 17%. And what we find is that in the 70s, a group of right-wing billionaires following the marching orders of Lewis Powell and his 1971 Powell memo created a whole series of think tanks that then led to the presidency of Ronald Reagan, when he was sworn into office on January 20th of 1981, in his inaugural address, he said, government is not the solution to your problem. Government is the problem. And for 40 years, we have been told that you can't trust government. And Donald Trump, of course, that was how he launched his campaign. You can't trust government. Right. They are lying to you. The system is rigged. They're letting in illegal aliens who are going to take your jobs and rape your women, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. So when we have now a genuine crisis that can really only be dealt with by something as large as government, and we've had a 40-year campaign by billionaires who are running this campaign, don't trust government, purely for two reasons. Number one, they want their taxes lowered, and they don't want to have to pay for public services. And number two, they want their businesses deregulated. They want to be able to blow as much poison out of their oil refineries as they can. But the outcome of that has been that Americans have lost their faith in government. What do we do with this? And I'm sorry, I think we have about 2 minutes here before we hit a hard break.
Well, I have to write another book based on what you just asked, because I really think it's a core problem. Disinformation is malignant. It's very important to try to help people to trust their government. The issue is, did people ever trust their parents. And what happens when their parents were dethroned, when they realized their parents were just people and they couldn't answer all the questions? Usually, government is there as a positive force when you're 5 or 6 years old, as one of the things you can trust, plus religion. And, plus learning about civics and history. So I think that there's a serious problem here, because how to restore trust is a very hard thing when trust is broken. But I think that trust is not as broken as the Pew poll suggests. It's that there's more doubt and distrust in terms of not being confident, sort of what Reagan said about Russia, trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And I think that's more that's going on. And the question is how to even go about that. And I think that the problem with misinformation, which is malignant and it is a poison, is that it gets people scurrying away from doubt into certainty. So there are two camps now, those who trust it and those who don't. And that is the problem. I would like to restore doubt so people can start to think again. Because one of the things that's important is being able to have nuanced thinking and not see things in black and white, either or. Because I think some of the anti-vaxxers have some element of concern that some of the people who are in favor of mandates also share. By the way, government was under attack in the 50s, so we have to go back further, by Senator Joseph McCarthy. And he said the government was full of communists and homosexuals in those days. And people really were afraid of him and afraid of government. And then they got more positive about government after McCarthy was thrown out, and then when Eisenhower. I don't want to go through the whole history, but it's very important. Because people were so distrustful that Mort Saul, a comedian, once told a story of talking with a congressman and McCarthy said, the government's full of communists and homosexuals. And this congressman said, Mr. McCarthy, is it okay to belong to both groups? And that's the level of distrust.
Right. And let's not forget our humor. Dr. Justin Frank, it's always great talking with you and following you, Justin Frank MD on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.